In the last few months, I've had the job of covering a lot of different games for VGS. Most were sequels, some were reimaginings of pre-established franchises. Not every game was as polished or as tightly designed as each other, but that's not always the point. Each had its own unique style and flavor, but that kept the core of what makes them great, while making those changes and creating their own identity. I don't want to be an unfair judge and say, compare Doom Eternal to Ghost Recon Breakpoint, because I loved Doom, and very much disliked Breakpoint for very different reasons. I myself am not a big fan of the looter-shooter games as a service leveled gear system that Breakpoint and many other AAA games bring to the table. The 10-year plan just doesn't interest me. When you do something like that, the unfortunate nature of the design is inherently flawed, because nothing can be so much stronger than any other individual weapon or piece of gear, or else it breaks the balance of the game. Most of the time, this creates a scenario where things feel very underpowered, or the right level of impact just can't be reached, because that'll stop the grind and search for the next best piece of gear, and stop the player from picking the game back up again. This design model is there to keep a player on the service for as long as possible, creating a revenue stream with recurrent user spending, while a slow trickle of content comes down from the pipe and creates this illusion that bigger things are coming and that you'll want to stick around for it. It can make a game feel lifeless and lackluster, and in some cases, where a game has a premium economy, it can be absolutely predatory. Herein lies the usual problem for this style of game. Your old content feels underpowered or more useless by default because the newer DLC characters or abilities usually outclass or even outright replace what you had at launch, unless you spent a lot of time and currency, whether that be in-game or premium, to keep your favorites up to task. Take Kamala Khan, for example. She is your starting character for the campaign of the game, and by the time you have a second controllable character, the Hulk, you've already invested time into her skill tree and picked up some gear. She has the same environmental abilities as the Hulk does, as both are able to smash open glass and doors to get to chests and secrets for more loot. The incentive to play as the Hulk at this point is lessened because you already have a higher gear level as Kamala, meaning a higher damage output and defense, and you're already familiar with her abilities. But the Hulk is new, but then you get your hands on the Hulk. It feels weak. Weaker than the new fledgling Avenger that Kamala is. This is not only due to the gear leveling system, but how the character balancing has to be as well. In a game like this, no character can be that much stronger than any other. The multiplayer suite is designed for anyone to be able to play as any Avenger and feel powerful, but I think it does the exact opposite. The Hulk may be able to take out a standard AIM robot in 3 or 4 hits, which is generally his normal combo, but the rest of the cast can do about the same. Playing as each character should be not functionally identical, with the only differences being their special character-specific abilities. The weight of the hits from the Hulk, or Thor, or a giant-sized Kamala should be huge, and you should be able to convey that kind of concept really easily with a high damage hit that should knock enemies back a distance. There should be more crowd control roles for these characters. It only makes sense when you take each individual's strength into consideration. When a lot of fans are coming to play these because of the films, they have a set expectation. The Hulk in this game is absolutely not going to take out any massive flying Leviathan like he did in the first Avengers movie. So then I kept unlocking new heroes, and every time it did, a wave of dread washed over me. I wondered how they were going to underpower the character, and as a result, I wasn't a huge fan of how Iron Man, Thor, and the Hulk played. But Black Widow felt okay. She's no superhuman, so the impact of her hits made sense in that context. And her special abilities and tech make up for her lack of super strength, just like in the comics. She was my favorite character to play as for a little while. And then I unlocked Captain America, the poster boy for this game, the leader of the Avengers, the man that you and the entire cast have been looking up to the entire game. And he plays great. Captain America is a brawler by nature. He does decent enough damage in hand-to-hand combat, but where he really shines are his shield-throwing skills. Taking out a crowd of enemies by charging a throw, having it slam against them, and then giving it a kick when it returns so it pinballs back at more enemies with more damage is really satisfying. And I spent the rest of the game playing like that almost exclusively. The last 2 hours of this campaign were really good because of this. And I went from not wanting to play any more, but to eager to finish. And that is a huge jump. For Captain America, they really understood what made him tick, top to bottom. There's a higher level of quality in his move list, in his design choices, and you can really feel that when you get him on controls. He feels really solid to play, and I think he may have gotten the most design love from Crystal Dynamics. It's just a shame that the rest of the team couldn't have gotten that treatment, or at least in my case, it really doesn't feel like that. I think this is the most important thing to point out when it comes to this game, since there are no special guns like in Destiny or in Ghost Recon Breakpoint. The way you interface with this world isn't through legendary weapons. It's through the legends of the comic book industry. So when the next big wave of DLC characters come out, they might just be well enough designed to replace someone you usually use because of whatever they might bring to the table with their special abilities. Or they might just be subpar and mostly uninteresting, like the rest of the cast is. Only time will tell. In short, it's really nice to be able to play as your heroes, as these characters you likely own t-shirts, posters, or other merch for. The ones that you've spent hundreds of dollars to see on screen in the last decade again and again. But for here, it only really lands if they get that same love in their gameplay. It's disappointing. It feels as though this is a new-aged licensed game, higher quality in graphics than the ones from the mid-2000s, but maybe about the same level of quality in playability. The game looks nice for sure, but I come from a background where I play a lot of character action games, where the visual spectacle serves as a vehicle for great combat and great gameplay. Marvel's Avengers didn't have to strive to be something like Devil May Cry to sell copies, though this would have been greatly appreciated. But outside of its title and name brand recognition, it doesn't feel like it has anything really in it to hold its own and stand out from the rest. It is coasting on the brand's popularity to sell units, rather than tightly designed and interesting gameplay. I think if the game had a few more months in the oven, it could have really turned out to be something super. I'm Richard for VGS.
You are not worthy